The wind howled across the empty plains like a ghost that refused to rest. For 15 long years, Jeremiah Cole had lived alone on his patch of desert land, his only company the dying sun and the whisper of the prairie grass. Once, he had been a ranch hand with dreams big as the Montana sky. Now, he was just another forgotten man of the frontier, tending to cattle that barely lived through the dust storms. Folks in town said he'd gone half mad from solitude, talking to his horses more than to people. But on a cold evening in the fall of 1889, everything changed, when he bought the land that everyone else refused to touch. The locals called it Ghost Valley, a piece of Apache land seized years ago after the wars. They said the spirits of the tribe still walked there, restless and vengeful. But Jeremiah didn't believe in curses, he believed in work. So when the deed passed into his hands for a few dollars, he thought it was a stroke of luck. The ranch was big, the soil rich, and the water from the canyon still ran clear. Yet from the first night, he knew something was wrong. The animals refused to graze near the creek. His dog howled at the empty hills. And sometimes, when the wind was still, he swore he could hear footsteps around his cabin, soft, deliberate, human. 3 nights after moving in, he saw her. The moon was full, casting silver light across the fields when a figure emerged from the shadows of the canyon, a woman, tall and proud, wrapped in a blanket of deerhide, her hair flowing black as the night. She didn't move like a ghost, she moved like a living storm, graceful and fierce. Jeremiah froze, hand on his rifle. But the woman only looked at him with eyes so old and sad they seemed to carry the entire history of her people. "This is still my home," she said in a voice quiet as a prayer. "You bought the land, but not me." He didn't know what to say. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing beauty carved by the wind and sorrow. She wasn't afraid of him, though she should have been. Jeremiah lowered his gun slowly. "You live out here?" he asked, disbelief in his tone. The woman nodded. "I am the last," she said. "The last Apache woman left behind." For the first time in years, Jeremiah felt something stir inside him, a mix of awe and pity, of curiosity and something deeper he couldn't name. The legends were true, but not in the way folks said. This wasn't a ghost haunting the land. This was a survivor, a living echo of a vanished world. And now, she stood on the land he owned, her presence rewriting everything he thought he knew about life, loneliness, and belonging. Her name was Tala, meaning, wolf, in her tongue. She had lived alone since the cavalry took her people away, hiding in caves, moving with the seasons, surviving on what the earth still offered. Jeremiah found her one morning kneeling by the creek, washing her hands in silence. He brought her bread and coffee, and though she hesitated at first, she accepted. From then on, they met every day at the edge of the water. She spoke little, but her silence said more than words could. As the weeks passed, something began to change between them. Jeremiah no longer heard the same hollow wind in the evenings. Instead, he found himself waiting for her shadow to appear among the rocks. She told him stories of her people, the songs of the stars, the spirit of the buffalo, the sacred promise that every woman carried within her heart. He listened, entranced, realizing how little he understood of the land he had claimed. "This place remembers," she said one evening, tracing a line in the dust. "It remembers who walked it before, and who took it after." Her words hit him like a stone to the chest. One night, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky split with lightning, and Jeremiah ran outside to find Tala standing in the rain, face tilted toward the heavens, her voice rising in a chant that shook him to his core. He grabbed her hand, pulling her under the porch. "You'll catch your death," he shouted, but she only smiled through the downpour. "You don't understand," she said softly. "The sky is crying for what was lost." And then, almost without thought, he pulled her into his arms. For a heartbeat, the world was silent, just rain, breath, and warmth in the middle of the storm. In the days that followed, they shared more than words. Tala began helping him mend fences, plant corn, and care for the horses. She moved through the world with a quiet grace that made even the wildest animals seem tame. At night, she would sit by the fire, humming in her native tongue, and Jeremiah would feel the walls around his heart crumble piece by piece. For the first time in years, the cabin felt like a home, not a prison. But peace in the Wild West never lasted long. One morning, a group of armed riders appeared on the horizon, men from town who had heard that the Apache ghost still lived on the ranch. They came with rifles and hatred, demanding Jeremiah turn her in. "She's no ghost," he said, standing firm. She's flesh and blood, and she's under my roof. But hatred didn't listen. Shots rang out across the valley, echoing through the hills. When the smoke cleared, Jeremiah was on his knees, blood on his hands, and Tala was gone, vanished into the wild she had come from. Months passed. The ranch grew quiet again, too quiet. Jeremiah searched every canyon, every shadow, calling her name, but she never answered. The land seemed to mourn with him, fields went dry, the wind turned bitter, and the nights stretched endlessly. He thought he had lost her forever. But one morning, when the dawn light spilled across the plains, he saw a single figure standing by the creek, where they had first met. Tala. She was dressed in white buckskin, her hair braided with eagle feathers. "I thought you were gone," Jeremiah whispered, his voice breaking. She smiled faintly. "I went where I belong," she said, placing her hand over his heart. "But the land told me you waited." He took her hand in his, trembling. "Stay," he said simply. "This place needs you. I need you." Tala looked toward the hills, where the wind carried the cries of distant coyotes. "The land has already chosen," she said. "You are its keeper now, Jeremiah Cole. You carry both the blood of settlers and the spirit of those who came before. That balance must live here, or all this will die." Before he could speak again, she kissed him gently, a whisper of warmth that burned through the years of loneliness. Then, as the morning sun rose higher, her form began to fade, becoming one with the mist that rose from the creek. From that day on, Jeremiah worked the ranch with renewed strength. The soil grew rich again, and wildflowers returned to the hills. Every evening, he sat by the water's edge, feeling her presence in the wind and the rustle of the wheat. Townsfolk stopped calling it Ghost Valley. They called it Wolf's Rest, after the woman who had once lived there, the last Apache who refused to be forgotten. And sometimes, when the moon was full, a lone rider passing through would swear they saw two figures walking along the creek, one man, one woman, side by side beneath the silver light, forever bound by the land they both loved. Her name was Tala, which in her tongue meant wolf, and Jeremiah thought it suited her perfectly, wild, proud, and untamed by anything man had ever built. She lived in the caves beyond the canyon, where she kept small fires burning and sacred markings drawn along the walls, symbols older than the ranch itself. For years she had survived there alone, hunting, gathering roots, living on what the land gave freely. Jeremiah had seen loneliness before, but never like hers. It wasn't the emptiness of loss, it was the endurance of someone who refused to vanish, even when the world turned its back. At first, she avoided him. He would leave food at the edge of the creek, jerky, bread, coffee beans, and find them gone by morning. Then one day, when the wind was soft and the sky burned with sunset, she appeared. No words, no fear. Just a calm gaze that told him she had decided to trust him. They shared the meal in silence, the fire crackling between them. The smell of rain drifted on the air, and for the first time in years, Jeremiah felt the warmth of another soul near him. Over the next few weeks, something changed in the rhythm of his days. The ranch didn't feel as empty anymore. He began waking early, knowing she might be near the creek, washing her hands or singing softly to the wind in her native tongue. Sometimes he would find her repairing his fence or tending to the horses, her movements fluid, quiet, graceful. "You don't owe me that," he said once. She looked up, her eyes reflecting the light of the fire. "The land belongs to both of us," she said simply. "I keep it alive, you keep it safe." Those words stayed in his heart long after she was gone each night. As trust grew, so did the stories. Tala spoke of her people, how they were driven from their homes, their sacred places burned, their voices silenced. She spoke without anger, just sorrow that ran deeper than time. "They took the land," she said one night, her voice trembling, "but they could not take its spirit. It still breathes. It still remembers." Jeremiah sat there in silence, staring into the flames, realizing that every fence post, every acre he claimed, was built upon bones of stories he'd never been told. The winter came early that year, hard and merciless. Snow fell thick, trapping him in the cabin for days. On the third night, when he was nearly out of firewood, he heard a soft knock at the door. When he opened it, Tala stood there, snow in her hair, her skin pale from cold. Without a word, he pulled her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and lit the fire. For a long while, they just sat there in silence, listening to the storm rage outside. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "When my people were taken," she said, "I was a child. I hid in the river reeds. When I came back, there was no one left. I've been waiting since then, for someone who sees me. Jeremiah swallowed hard. For 15 years he'd lived in silence, and now this woman, a ghost of the land itself, was breaking something open in him he'd long thought dead. He reached for her hand, rough from work and cold as the wind. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. For the first time, she smiled, a small, fragile smile that seemed to heal something deep in the air around them. From that night on, Tala stayed in the cabin. She helped him mend fences, cook, and tend to the cattle. He taught her how to ride, though she laughed and said the horse understood her better than him. They learned from each other, the man who had forgotten how to feel, and the woman who had forgotten what it meant to be seen. Together, they made the silence of the prairie sing again. But peace in the west never lasted. Word spread fast in the nearby town, rumors that Jeremiah Cole was harboring an Apache squaw on stolen land. Hatred moved quicker than the wind. One morning, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Jeremiah saw 5 riders approaching through the dust, men with rifles and the look of vengeance in their eyes. They didn't come to talk. "Step aside, Cole," their leader barked. "That savage don't belong here." Jeremiah's heart pounded, but he didn't move. "She belongs to this land more than any of us," he said. The men sneered. One of them spat into the dirt. "You lost your mind, old man." Before he could answer, the first shot rang out. The echo rolled across the valley, bouncing between the canyon walls. Tala grabbed his arm, her eyes fierce. "They won't stop," she said. "You must let me go." But Jeremiah shook his head, defiant. "I won't let them take you too." Bullets tore through the fences. Horses screamed. Jeremiah fired back, his hands trembling with rage and fear. The gunfire thundered through the valley, and when it stopped, only the wind moved. The men fled, wounded or dead. Smoke rose from the barn, flames licking the roof. Jeremiah turned, coughing, searching for Tala, but she was gone. Her blanket lay on the ground by the creek, wet with blood. He ran until his legs gave out, shouting her name into the emptiness. But the only answer was the wind, carrying her voice in whispers he could almost understand. "The land remembers. The wolf never dies." Would you like me to continue with part 3, the ending of Jeremiah and Tala's story, next?